What's good? This is your boy Tico, Tren, SYSBM, and this topic is going to be a subscriber request. It's going to be about, vacationing and the best places to vacation for while dating, for all intents and purposes, in the world. If you travel, there's going to be a breakdown of who's good where, what's good who, where, and when, basically. So it's going to be broken down into different classes, for all intents and purposes, based on race also. Because the sad part about that, the cold hard reality of today, no matter how you cut it, it depends on what race you are, that you'll be able to have more success in certain countries than other countries based on race alone, for all intents and purposes. So when it comes down to it, it is what it is. It's the truth. So no matter if you like it or not, it's pretty much going to be the truth no matter what. So this is going to be a breakdown. This subscriber request is from Mr. Montana, Joe Montana. He's not really the real Joe Montana, but that's his name on YouTube, and he's the one that left this in my subscribe. He left it in my comment section, basically, because you can do stuff like that, and I'll get to it and I'll basically make a video out of it for all intents and purposes. So typically how it works is either you email me and I make a video on it. You email me asking me or what a subject, and I'll make a video on it. Or you can leave it in my comment section, and I'll turn it into a video for all intents and purposes. That's typically how this works. So at the end of the day, it's pretty much this is basically the title of this video is subscriber requests Date-Cation. What I mean by that is it's like a dating vacation, basically. So basically, what I'm talking about is going somewhere just to date or get some booty, if that's what you like, basically. That's typically how this live stream is going to go. The best places to go, depending on your race, your nationality, or where you're from, all intents and purposes. So it's going to be the best places to go based on your race and stuff like that. So this is going to be a list based on from what I know and from what my friend Marco, Rue, and everybody else that's in my party basically knows. The best places to go if you're black, white, Asian, Arab, you name it, basically. I'm going to break it down for you. Latinos, I'm gonna basically tell you the best places to go based on your culture or race or heritage for all intents and purposes. However, I would like to start this live stream off by saying, if you plan on dating somebody from one of these places, keep her ass in that place. Let me repeat myself. If you plan on dating somebody from one of these places, keep her ass in that place. Do I have to repeat that one more time? If you plan on dating somebody from any of these places, keep her ass in her home base. Don't move her back to your country. Unless it's a third world country, don't move her back to your country. Don't do none of that unless it's a third world country. So I'm gonna stress that at the beginning because I don't want nobody run out there. Well, Tico said no, bitch. I didn't say that. If she's from that country, unless you live in a third world country yourself, if she's from that country, keep her ass in that country. That's basically all I want to tell you. Basically, on that note, because I don't want to hear nothing that where they go. Well, Tico said it's best to date girls and you can bring them home. No, Tico ain't say all that shit. Tico ain't say none of that shit at all. Tico will punch you in the eye for lying on Tico. But yeah, let's continue on. Basically, I'm gonna start off by saying this. When it comes to races, white people have the advantage when it comes to travel. White people are good anywhere in the world. They pretty much are like American Express. Anywhere you want to be, or as a MasterCard, anywhere you want to be, basically. White men have the pick of the litter when it comes down to it. So getting that out the way, that was like the easiest one. Basically, when it comes to white men, the only time they have a problem is their own country with their own women. Now, something I've noticed with white men is they have a better chance of dating. They have a better chance of finding something better within their country if it's from another race than they do if it's their own race within their own country. that one I'm kicking off the bat by saying this. Typically, white men are good dating or smashing and dashing or whatever uh having sex vacays in countries outside of their own. So if you're a white male and you're from the United States, any country that's not your country is good for you to go for a smash or dash, basically, or just to get some pussy, basically. Any country is pretty much good for you to go if you want to date, too. Also, so there's not too many countries that's not open to a white man for all intents and purposes, and it is what it is. Unless you go to one of them forbidden places like that island where you got the motherfuckers shooting bows and arrows at motherfuckers. Typically, typically anywhere in the world is good for a white man to actually go and date or go on a sexcation for all intents and purposes. A sexcation is basically you go on vacation just for sex. A datecation is you go on vacation to get a date. Let me clarify those two things. So for a datecation or a sexcation, white men are good anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world outside of their own country. Something that I noticed with a lot of the countries, especially like the European countries, is for some odd reason, the American accent is like an aphrodisiac in the European countries. Um, so if you're a guy and you have an American accent, basically an American accent for all intents and purposes, as long as it ain't certain American accents, because I do want to clarify, because certain American accents tend to be turnoffs. But typically, if you don't have like a strong Southern drawl and you're not dragging your words out, and you don't sound like that, you'll be fine in the world. You'll be fine in the world for all intents and purposes. Um, if you're white, that is, you'll be fine in the world. However, only group of people that can get away with doing some shit like that would be black people. Black people is the only people in the world, only people in the United States who can get away with an accent like that in another country. And that's typically the upside to actually doing it, because the world's view on black people and how everybody views black people. So it's kind of sort of understandable, and it's one of those things where like that accent becomes like an aphrodisiac to women not living in America for all intents and purposes. So typically, if you're going to have an accent like that and you're going to have that drawl, and you're going to be talking like Bubba Gump, you can pretty much date in Italy. You could date in Italy, France, Poland, Germany, and Sweden for sure, most definitely. You can also date. It's kind of sort of 50-50 shot when it comes to China. If you sound like that, if you're black, but it's one of those things where it's like, "What's up, George Lopez?" Boston, you're fine. Boston's fine. It's just the southern accent that is where it starts getting kinky at, basically. If you're a black man from the South, you got that drawl like that, and you sound like Bubba Gump, basically, or you sound like, Phineas, you might want to be black if you're going to lead the country to do that. Typically. Because that accent really doesn't really get you anywhere unless you're black. And unless you're black and you live in, like, you're black and you're going to other countries for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where that southern drawl basically is bad for you unless you're black. In Italy, UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Poland, and pretty much any of the Dutch-speaking countries. So if you're going to have a southern drawl, it's best for you to go to. I mean, even Spain. You're good. You're good in Spain too. If you are Catalonia, Cantonese. I mean, Catalonia, basically. That little section of Spain, you're good there too. But you're good in Spain as well, because for some odd reason, there's something about that accent that's much different from all the other accents in America. The Bostonian accent is a weird accent for the fact that it makes you sound like you're damn near in a mob. Um, or it makes you sound like it makes it sound like it's a matter of fact for all intents and purposes when it comes to the Bostonian accent, Mr. Forma. So it makes everybody from Boston's, it makes them sound like it's a matter of fact. Like, you can say anything. It could be the most off the wall shit, and it would sound like it's a matter of fact. For a matter of fact, you can be like, well, the sky's purple. in your Bostonian accent, everybody would be like, okay, that's what's up. The sky's purple. And it's one of those things where like it makes you sound like it's a matter of fact, and nobody's willing to doubt you for the fact that you just sound like you're dangerous. Or you sound like something from a mobster movie, basically. That's typically how that works. Uh, but generally speaking, if you're white, the only accent you don't want to have is a southern accent. Um, or the deep southern accent, basically. Is the only accent that you don't want to have. If you're black, the southern accent works for you. Because there's something I don't know. There's something endearing about especially if you're a big black guy. There's something endearing about a big black ox. I mean, a big goofy ox, basically. When it comes down to it, there's something very endearing to women when you sound like that. You sound like you can fuck up a lot of shit if you're black, all because black actually looks bigger than what it really is for all intents and purposes, because everybody sees black as much bigger than what it really is. That's typically why. That's typically why you get the whole entire range of height and weight when it comes to black men. He was a black man between 5'7" and 6'5", basically. About 150 pounds to 265 pounds, basically, because black makes you look bigger than what you really are. That's typically how that works. So it's more endearing. That accent is more endearing when you're black than it is when you're white. For that reason, because it just makes you look bigger and it makes you look more dangerous and it makes you sound more dangerous. Even though half the time these black men sound like teddy bears, it typically makes you sound dangerous for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things as a black man that is good for you to actually have and good for you to actually be is, have that southern accent, southern drawl, and that southern accent, like you grew up in the bayou or you grew up in the backwoods for all intents and purposes. Um, what's up, George Lopez? What's up, Mr. Forma again? But typically that's how that stuff works. On top of that, if like I said, like I was saying, back to the white men, if you're going to travel the world, anywhere is good for you outside of your country. If you're going to stay in your country, statistically, you're more likely to be in a better relationship with somebody outside your race than you are with a woman in your race. That's just the statistics. It sucks, but it is what it is. Something I've noticed is like black women and white men tend to have better relationships, and black women tend to actually act like they got some fucking sense when they're dating a white man, unlike when they date a black guy. So that's a good thing right there from off the bat. Um, Typically, what happens with that, I don't know what it is, but apparently, white women tend to act like they got some sense and tend to act like they got some class when they date a white man. Black women tend to do that a lot for some odd reason. Us black men always go to work. We got our professional voice. We're like, and you got your hood voice when you leave work, basically. So that's pretty much how that works. But for black women, they tend to stay in that professional. They send us they like if her name's Shaniqua, she showed up as Shauna just for work, basically. if your name is Tom, you showed up as Thomas for work, basically. So basically, it's the professional version of your name. What's up, Billy the Goat? And this is typically how a lot of this stuff works. So white men are good anywhere in the world except for if you have crazy draw, that crazy southern draw. You're good anywhere in the world if you're a white man for all intents and purposes outside of your own country. Um, and typically, what I've noticed with a lot of white men is they tend to have better relationships with black women and or black women who live in their country for all intents and purposes is the best I've ever noticed. Like the best relationships I've ever noticed between a black biracial couple, black woman, white man is typically the best relationships. Typically ends up being some of the best, longest lasting relationships in America or your country in general, let it be Canada or any English speaking country or any country where there's black and white people where they mix side by side. It's typically going to be generally white women date. I mean, black women dating a white guy tends to be a better fit or a better choice, and they tend to have much more longer lasting relationships too. Um, Sad but true. Moving on to black men. Like I said, white men, you're pretty much good anywhere in the world, so there's really no need to break it down. You pretty much have a passport to any country, and everybody will accept you with open arms for all intents and purposes. And that's pretty much all it really is. Because believe it or not, a lot of the countries are actually going through a lightening phase. So they're trying to be as light as humanly possible, and they're importing a lot of white people to make it so. Especially the Latin countries, especially India, especially all those other countries, for pretty much under the sun. So any of those countries, most of those countries are all going through a lightening process in their demographic. Um, Moving on to black men. Black men, we'll go to Asians because it'll be faster. Asian men, you're typically good in Eastern Europe, or your own culture. Now I will say this: in Latin America, Asian men do so. Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Latin America, Eastern Europe, India, and I want to say Latin America are good places for y'all to go if you want to meet somebody, or anywhere in Asia for all intents and purposes. Anywhere in Asia, throughout Asia, um, not including like not including not including Arab not including Arab countries, basically like your Indias, your Orient countries, basically your Asian Orient countries, basically your stuff like that. So your Koreas, Chinas, Japans, Singapores, Malaysias, Cambodias, um, Indias, Sri Lankas, and Pakistan's basically. Is it Pakistan? Yeah, Pakistan basically, or anywhere you can go right there. Anywhere else, and when you start going more towards the Middle East, you'll start to see a bit of a pushback, or you start to see a bit of a resistance against you for all intents and purposes. So typically, it's best for you to go with India, Latin America, Latin America, Asia, Eastern European countries like your Russias, your Belaruses, countries like that for all intents and purposes. And you could get lucky. You could get lucky as a student if you go to like any of the English speaking countries like US, UK, and Canada. But typically, you would have to be looking for your significant other while you're in college. It's typically how that will work if you're Asian. If you're an Asian person, you would typically have to be looking for your significant other then. And I'm talking about Asians as in like I'm talking about Asians as in India and Orients, basically Asians. So typically, y'all would be better. Y'all would be better for those countries. Another good example of a country. Another good example. Another group of people that Arabs. Arabs are pretty much like white people. Believe it or not, Arabs are just like white people. They're As long as they don't go too crazy or they ain't got no shit going on with them, like the crazy gangs that they got in like Great Britain and shit like that, and a few other countries. Arab men tend to be very very. What's up, Baron Yam? Arab men tend to be ranked towards the top when it comes to other countries. They're pretty much accepted in Latin America. They're accepted in America. They're accepted in Canada. So basically, anywhere an Arab man wants to go is good for him. Um, it's sad, but it's typically how that works. They basically have like an all access pass. But parts of the countries I wouldn't, certain parts of certain countries I wouldn't go to if you were Arab. Southern America, basically, like Southern U.S., basically. So any of the states where, like, I was talking about where if you have like that accent, if you're white, I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't go there if I was an Arab person. So anytime you can actually avoid that accent, or you can go to Florida. If you go to Florida, you're fine. If you go to like Georgia, you might be okay to find somebody. But typically, we're talking about men here, Mr. Foreman. Not Yeah, they do. They all do for all intents and purposes. But I'm talking about men here. I'm not talking about women. It's not about women today. We're talking about men going around the world and getting some booty. That was my Cy Robertson impression. Some booty. No, but typically Arab men are pretty much accepted. Almost, yeah, pretty much almost like white people. They might have like a certain places that frown upon them for all intents and purposes. They have better access. They have better access than other groups for all intents and purposes. So typically, Arab men are accepted even in Latin America, North America, um, European countries, India, their own country. Asia is another good example of a place where they're actually accepted. Stuff like that for all intents and purposes. So you'll run into that. Um, Moving right along to another group of people, black men. Black men, it's a bit rough for you, like I said, but when it comes down to it, you can actually make it in this world too. When it comes to dating outside your race, like black men, it's good for black men to go to countries like. No, I'm gonna have to get more specific for black men because when it comes down to it, you run into a lot more problems and a lot more barriers when it comes to things because black. Let's just keep it 100. So typically, starting with Europe, your best bets are Italy, Great Britain, Italy, Great Britain, Portugal, Spain, Poland, Germany, any of the Dutch countries, Sweden, any of the Icelandic countries, basically. Um, any of the Icelandic countries, for all intents and purposes, are good. So, like all the Scandinavian countries are good for black men, African American men, uh, stuff like that. Afro Canadians should be good in those countries too. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Because I'm about to have a bunch of Afro Canadians all on a plane trying to jump on a plane to go somewhere. Afro Canadians who don't have an accent, who were born in Canada, like African Americans are born in the United States, have a better chance of going to these countries. However, I will say this: when it comes to African men, I'll do them later because African men are way different. Um, African men and Caribbean men are way different. At the end of the day, um, when it comes down to it, I mean like Canadian-born African Canadians that are like not from Africa but literally born in Africa, born in America, born in the Americas, have like the typical Canadian Canuck accent. Basically, is what I'm talking about. So Canadians that actually sound like Head MGTOW is a good example of that, or Canadians that actually sound like somebody like that. So, like I said, going through all the countries, you're good in a good portion of the European Union. You can meet women. You can meet women in European countries as well. Stuff like that. So you can meet women in Eastern European countries as well too. Um, when it comes down to it, but I would say your main focus should be Italy, Poland, Germany. Um, Italy, Poland, Germany, the UK, Spain, Portugal, any of the Dutch-speaking countries, and Scandinavia. All the Scandinavian countries from Iceland all the way over to um, what's that? Sweden. Um, Albania is a nice choice for black men too, and I'm trying to think of another country. I'm trying to think of another country for all intents and purposes that actually fit into that. But I'm gonna go with those ones for now. Good Asian countries to pop up in would be depending on what your depending on what your finances look like. Depending on what your finances look like, I'm being real. I'm keeping it 100. If you're just one of them 9 to 5 guys, basically, I wouldn't really suggest this. But if you're a business owner, I would suggest it. Or if you're like a broker, or you pretty much do investments and stuff like that, I would definitely suggest these countries: China, Japan, Korea, um, China, Japan, Korea, South Korea, um, yeah, China, Japan, South Korea, um, some parts of India, and I would say Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines. Well, Philippines, you can I'm not even gonna include that in that group because you can pretty much go anytime as a black man. But I would say Singapore, Malaysia, and places like that for all intents and purposes, and some parts of India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. If you're black, if you're black and you're financially set for all intents and purposes, those are good places to go. If you're black and you're not financially set, I would say the Philippines, Thailand, um, the Philippines, Thailand, and the Philippines, Thailand, and North Korea. South Korea is good for you too. Um, Stuff like that, for all intents and purposes, is good for you. When it comes to Arab countries, your best bet would be Afghanistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Dubai. Dubai, you might want to have some money when you go there if you're a black man, though. But typically, it's good for you to show up in like Dubai if you have money. But all the other countries that I name are pretty much good for you to go. Iran is another good country to go if you're black. Um, I would never suggest a black man to go to Northern Africa because they have a shared history of making black people disappear while on the layover. Especially if black people leave the airport and go like try to walk around and try to look at things, they typically have a history of making you disappear and you never making it back to your country on your layover. So Northern Africa, I wouldn't say go. Um, are there parts of Northern Africa where you can go and it won't happen? Yeah, there are some. But to break that down, you would literally have to break out a map and go to these minuscule places to basically make it happen for all intents and purposes. Um, but like Africa's another good place for black people to go, also black men to go. Um, from other countries, let it be Canada, let it be America, let it be Great Britain, places like that. Africa is definitely a good place to show up in. Um, the rest of Africa, that is not not Northern Africa, like all the places where niggas look like niggas. It's better for you to show up if you're black. Um, you will get questions like, "Are you married? Do you have any children?" Stuff like that. Once you get past that initial shit, you'll be good to go. Um, places for black men to go in the Americas basically would be pretty much all the Caribbean islands, uh, all the Bahamian islands. Uh, I would say as far as like Central America, Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, and depending on which way the wind's blowing, Chile, and Chile and Peru. Um, Depending on which way the wind's blowing for the last two, for as far as Chile and Peru is concerned. But I would say if you're going to go to South America, I would say stick to the northern parts, to be honest with you. Oh, Ecuador. Ecuador is also a good place to go if you're black. And Papua New Guinea, I think no, New Guinea. Uh, I forget how to pronounce that one, but yeah, that's a good place to show up too if you're black. That's typically the best places to show up if you're black in on this side of the world. Um, so it's one of those things where like once you break it down, they're good for both dating. Well, let me rephrase that because when it comes to black men, if you're going to stay in Latin America, when it comes down to it, this goes for everybody. This goes for every single man in the world. If you're going to stay in Latin America, or if you're going to date in that Latin America, you're going to want to pick up some Spanish. And if you're going to Brazil, you're going to want to pick up some Brazilian too, some Brazilian Portuguese. It's typically how that works. So when you go to Latin America, you're going to want to have some Spanish backing you, and you're going to want to have some Brazilian Portuguese backing you too. Because typically, a lot of the women, they're hip to a lot of the men going to those places. So there's only a certain caliber of women you're going to get if you don't know any Spanish. Whereas there's going to be a better caliber of women that you can get the more Spanish you know. So the more Spanish you know, the more serious they take you, and the more likely you're going to be able to get like a person for all intents and purposes. Another good example of that is if you plan on staying in there or renting an apartment there, that's also good. In South America, that actually gets you even better caliber of women. This goes for all groups of people. That gets you a better caliber of women for all intents and purposes. How that works is because you have an apartment or a place of residence there, women take you more serious and they're used to seeing you, so they're more likely to talk to you or be open to you for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where you're not going to get the low caliber of women no more if you don't speak Spanish. You're not, and the same thing goes for Brazil because a lot of men get stuck. A lot of men think they got high caliber women in Brazil, but they're really working with low caliber women in Brazil. The same thing goes for Colombia. The same thing goes for Venezuela. Venezuela, they're in a bit of a desperate strait right now, so they're willing to date. They're willing to take anything. So if you're going to do anything in South America, your best bet is to go to Venezuela. As far as like Colombia is concerned, on the other hand, the less Spanish you know, the more problem the more easier the women. Um, no, I mean as far as easy women, that is not like easier to get a woman. You typically were running to women who are very very easy, like they would call them hoes in America, or women that would sleep with anything and everything for all intents and purposes. So you got those ones. That's that market. Then you also got the ones where the women have children and they use sex to basically pay for their children's well-being and their well-being too. If you don't know any Spanish in Colombia, then you got like the next tier up, which will be women that might entertain the thought of messing with you for all intents and purposes, and those ones tend to be low. The more Spanish you know, the better quality women you'll get, or the more Brazilian Portuguese you know, the better quality woman you'll get. Because there's a lot of men that'll go there and be like, I just hit this. She was fine as hell, and meanwhile, she's like the Brazilian 3, Brazilian 4, Brazilian 5, maybe. And typically, when you start wanting like Colombian Colombian sixes, sevens, eights, and nines and tens, you typically got to know. It basically comes with your level of Spanish that you know. So the least amount of Spanish you know, you're more likely to get the ones, twos, and threes, and maybe some fours. And then like with very little Spanish, you can get like a 5 or a 6. The more Spanish you know, you tend to start getting like the 7, 8s, and 9s when it comes to those countries. It's typically how it works because a lot of those women are like they pretty much know the game and they know that men come there for sex and they know that's the reason why they're there. So a lot of them aren't really checking for men who just speaks English and they don't speak a lick of Latin, speak a lick of Spanish for all intents and purposes. So those countries, a lick of Spanish and or a lick of Portuguese for them for those reasons. And typically, what happens with a lot of those women is either if they do mess with you, do either use you, or they'll basically use you for money, or they'll finesse you basically typically a lot of the women that are over 5, 6, and 7s, basically, will typically be more likely to finesse you if you don't speak a lick of like Brazilian Portuguese or a lick of Spanish. So you got to watch out for that as a man, both white and or black. Something that I've noticed with a lot of white men who go to Latin American countries, if they don't speak Spanish, they're more likely to get caught up in some shit legally for all intents and purposes. Because women would go as far as to finesse a white man in Latin America before they finesse a black man in Latin America. For some odd reason, that typically is one of those things where like you see a white man, you see dollar signs, so you finesse them. It's typically how that works. And it's sad, but it happens that way all throughout Latin America. But when it comes down to it, if you're black, you basically want to stick to northern South America. So all the northern countries in South America, and I would say Chile, depending on which way the wind blowing, and Peru, depending on which way the wind's blowing, is where you want to stick to. I wouldn't even go to if I was any man, I wouldn't even go to Argentina at all. Any man, I wouldn't go to Argentina. If you're a white man, definitely check out Uruguay and Paraguay. If you're a white man, I would say check out every single country in South America except for Argentina. Why do I say check out every country besides Argentina? Because they have a very vicious feminist population there that would make Antifa and the feminists in Americas or in the Western world look like they're pretty much Girl Scouts. Pretty much. So I would definitely watch out for those people. So if you're going to go to Argentina, you better go always looking over your shoulder and always willing to protect yourself, because it's one of those things where like if they can use you, abuse you, or get you all jammed up, they will. It's typically how that works. Like a good example of that is like I was talking to a girl from Argentina, but I'm not willing. I was talking to one a while ago, but I'm not willing to actually take that chance myself as a black man. And the sad part about that is I'm probably ranked as one of the most dangerous people in the world, but I'm not willing to take that chance because I'm not willing to, put my name on a line, my family name on a line for no fucking reason, all for some peace leave for all intents and purposes. So it's simply one of those things where I dodge Argentinian women for that reason, because I don't got time for my family name to be disrespected and or ran through the courts in Argentina. So typically, yeah, that's your best bets if you're black. Basically, go to Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, Chile, depending on which way the wind's blowing, Peru, depending on which way the wind's blowing, and pretty much the northern part of South America is best for you. So let me pull up something so y'all can actually get adjusted, because I know some of y'all are gonna be like, well, Tico, I don't understand. So I'm gonna pull up a map for you when it comes to black people. La 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 la. This one's more colored. This one's more annoying too. Why does Pinterest got to be annoying as fuck? Why am I logging into Pinterest? I don't feel like doing this. Screw you, Pinterest. How did I get to Pinterest anyway? Shit. I went out. Bye-bye. I'll take this one. This one's better. All right, here we go. Much fucking better. World Atlas, really? This is what we're doing now? This is really what we're doing now. All right, here we go. So this map right here will be good for black people to go. If you're going to go anywhere in the world, this will be your best bet right here. Wait, oh, wrong one. La 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 la. Picked the wrong one again. Hang on. Let me change that. Chrome. There we go. Much better. Holy shit. So typically, let me make that bigger. Typically, you're going to want this country, all these countries, Brazil, if you're black, and Ecuador. Ecuador is good for you to show up and pop up in too if you're black. Like I said, Peru, it depends on which way the wind's blowing. And Chile, which is right about here. No. Right about here. Somewhere in here is a good is no Chile. I'm sorry, Chile's right here. I'm sorry. Chile's good for you to pop up in depending on which the time of year or when it's when you're going for all intents purposes. So Chile's a good place to pop up depending on what time of year it is or when and where. I'll break that down for you in a further video, basically. And Ecuador is good for you to go. Colombia is good for you to go. Venezuela is good for you to go. Guyana is good for you to go. Suriname is good for you to go. French Guyana is good for you to go. And Brazil is good for you to go, most definitely. Chile, it depends on which way the wind's blowing or what time of year it is. And Peru, same thing for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things when it comes down to it. So basically, you basically want to stay from Brazil to this, basically. So you basically want to follow this line. Let me rephrase that. Like you want to go from Brazil right here. You want to go from here. You want to stay within here. And basically to here, basically, if you're black. Like I said, every now and again, it's good to go here or here, but mainly stick to here. And that's pretty much what that is as far as South America is concerned. When it comes to Central America, I'm going to show you a map of that right there when it comes to Central America. If you're black. That's Pinterest again. How the fuck do I keep on getting on this site? Fuck that site. Stop it. Fuck that site. Let's see here. Okay, we got something. There we go. That's okay. Here we go. Share this one again. Chrome. Central American Atlas. I'm gonna click on them one at a time, basically, because I can. This is a good country for black people to go. Nicaragua, definitely check that out if you're black. My favorite country in the whole entire world. Good place to go, most definitely. So definitely check out Costa Rica if you're going to go there. Another good country to check out is Panama. If you're black, and you want to go on a date-cation or a sex-cation. I'm going the rest of these countries. Let me stop. That ain't right. Let me stop. That ain't right. Belize, very lovely spot to go in Central America. Definitely check that out. Yes, Belize is in Central America. It's not an island. um, Yeah, I wouldn't really mess with too many of these other ones unless you like death. Mexico is a good place to go to, even though it's not Central America. It's technically North America, but Mexico is definitely a good place to show up in. Most definitely, most definitely. Another Latin country that's good to go to is Cuba. If you're black, if you want to go on a date-cation or a sex-cation, um, in any of the other islands basically out there for all intents and purposes, except for I would say except for probably Puerto Rico. I would say Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico because of their what they got going on. It's probably not the best places to go if you're black for all intents and purposes. Hell, Dominican Republic's not safe for white people, so I wouldn't even suggest black people to go. Um, let's just keep it 100 because white people are showing up missing and black people are showing up missing by the boatloads, by the carloads, literally. So it's one of those things where it's like Dominican Republic, I wouldn't go. Whenever they could clean up their act, I would say definitely check it out. Same thing goes for Puerto Rico. You can go if you're white, but as far as you being black and going, I would wait till they, sort out their other issues for all intents and purposes. If you're black, if you're Arab, you'll be fine. Um, things like that, you'll be fine if you're one of those ones, or if you're a matter of fact, Indians are pretty good for going there too. Um, so that's one thing that you got to watch out for, most definitely. Um, so it's things like that, and it's things like that in places like that that actually are really really good for you to check out. Definitely if you're a black man. And I had to break it down like that for on purpose for the fact that everybody thinks they can go anywhere in the world, meanwhile they can't. And I don't need motherfuckers being, well, Tico said, nah, nah, nigga, nah. Tico ain't say that. Um, but if you're going to go to those countries, those are definitely good countries to definitely check out. Um, you'll be shocked. You'll be shocked how many Indians actually speak Spanish. Shockingly. Um, oh, there goes Joe Montana. He finally showed up. Joe, what is your ethnic background? Since you're here now, what is your ethnic background? Because I already broke it down. If you're white, you're pretty much good to go. Unless you have like like a crazy southern drawl, like the movie Deliverance, you're pretty much good to go anywhere in the world. Um, oh, for an Asian guy, you're Asian. Okay. Any country, if you're a student in college, but I would say Eastern European countries, um, India, and some parts of Europe, depending on which way the wind's blowing and depending on what their political stance is that year or that for those 4 years or 2 years or 6 years, depending on how long your prime minister or president pretty much serves. Because what I noticed with Asian guys is Asian guys are good in places like Canada, college towns near any college town, any town near a college or a college town, or if you're a student, you have a better chance of actually getting a date too. I would say if you're going to be Asian and go anywhere for an easy lay, I would say definitely go to Latin America Latin America. Um, yeah, any part of Latin America would be good for you to show up in or go. If you're Asian. Toronto is a good place, but you'll have to put in a little bit of work in Toronto. Not too much, but you'll have to put in a little bit of work there. Um, Minnesota, if you're going to Minnesota, it's a good place to go. Um, as everybody calls it in this stream, California, California. Um, let's see, New York, places like that for all intents and purposes. Um, will be good for Asian guys to go. I mean, it's not the biggest market for Asian guys when it comes down to it. I know this, but to optimize it, I would say definitely those places. Latin America, all of Latin America, California, Minnesota, um, New York, depending on where you live out in New York, and depending on what job you have in New York, um, or if you're just visiting New York, uh, Toronto, Eastern Europe, and places that like that for all intents and purposes would be good for you to go if you're Asian. Um, yeah, those are typically the best. Oh yeah, and India, India also. Yeah, India also is good for you to pop up in, and Sri Lanka, places like that. There's a lot of Asians. There's a lot of Asians that are intermingling with Arabs in Dubai and places like that. But typically, with the places like that, you typically got to have some money of some sort, basically, to do anything with those places. Unfortunately, um, Africans and Caribbean men. I put them in the same boat for the same reason, for the fact that typically they're one of few groups who really don't have to travel to get women. Most European women travel to them or to their country to get dick. So I put them in that group for that reason, for the fact I put them together for that reason, for the fact that European women will travel to Jamaica to go bang a Jamaican when they have Jamaicans right in their own country, right next door to them. They'll travel to Jamaica to go bang a Jamaican, or they'll travel to Africa to go get an African. And that's typically where a lot of European white women go when it comes to sexcations for all intents and purposes. They'll go to places like Jamaica, or they'll go to places like Africa, and sometimes places in Central and South America. Is typically where they go. So typically, when it comes down to when it comes down to that, they really don't have to travel anywhere as far as they're concerned, because women usually just comes to their countries. If they're there at the right time in the right place, it typically pans out for them. As far as like actually meeting women around the world when it comes to Africans or Jamaicans, um, the ones that gravitate towards Africans or Jamaican the most is African American women and white women. Typically gravitate towards Jamaicans the most. Jamaicans and Africans. I mean, not Jamaican. Well, Caribbeans and Africans the most. Typically, be your black women and white women. They tend to gravitate towards them the most. Um, so it's one of those things where it's like any country where there's a black woman or a white woman, basically black women or white women, you're typically going to get you're pretty much, unless it's like overly saturated with Africans or Jamaicans. Because like the sad part about that, Swedish women can have a bunch of Africans who live in their country, but to actually go to Africa to bang an African if they really wanted to. Um, so if you're going to go on a visit, I would say if you're going to visit, I would say don't live in none of these countries and typically go there to visit. If you're African or Jamaican with means, I would say go to the same places that Africans could go to. I mean, African Americans could go to, plus some, which would end up being like, which would end up being um, China, Japan, um, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines will be good for you if you're a Jamaican or African man, for almost definitely. Um, Scandinavia, I wouldn't really suggest it. I wouldn't suggest Scandinavia. I wouldn't suggest any of the Scandinavian countries at all. I would suggest you, if you're going to do it, I would suggest you to go towards like Eastern Europe, um, Eastern Europe, Germany, Poland, and Dutch speaking countries, but for all intents and purposes. All the other countries I wouldn't really mess with the exception of like Italy. You can mess with Italy. I would say go to Italy, Portugal, and Spain. If you're African or Jamaican and you're going to go on a date-cation or a sex-cation, definitely go check those places out if you're one of those people. Um, Outside of that, because all the other countries pretty much have a bunch of y'all there in Europe, they pretty much have the urge to want to travel to your country to bang somebody from your country. Because I don't know if it's one of those things where they don't feel as though you're no longer authentic enough to be considered to have sex with, or if it's one of those things where like they want something from that country and they don't want you, even though you're from that country, from another country, from that country that they're traveling to, they don't want you because they want to be able to have the appearance of like them being good girls or them being like not like that for all intents and purposes. So they typically travel to these places for this reason. Um, it's typically how it goes. So it's one of those things where ends up being one of those things where it typically be one of those things where you end up like trying to sort out. It ends up being one of those things where it's typically for you to easily to do that in like your Italy's, your Portugal's, your Spain's, and your I wouldn't even mess with France. Just those three countries on that side of the on that side of Europe, I would say you're good in. On the other side of Europe, I would say what like your Germany's, your Germany's, your Poland's. Well, not too much Poland, but your Germany's and places like Germany, basically. I would say Germany at the most on that side. Then you got like, you got your you got places like Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia basically that are good spots for you to check out too. When it comes to African American men or Afro Canadians, I would say that are actually Afro Canadian, not like their parents are transplants. Um, I would say you're pretty much good in most of Europe because your accent is pretty much an aphrodisiac. Um, north North versus South. Um, well, when it comes to certain countries like that I was mentioning, like a good example of that would be Singapore's Singapore and Malaysia. Another good example of that would be Albania and places like Albania where culture is very strong. Typically, how it works is if you can keep your mouth shut and you don't run their business, they're more likely to sleep with you. So you got to be able to like not be sitting up there trying to gloat and put them on blast and shit like that, like some dudes be doing sometimes. Because typically, how it works is if you can keep your mouth shut, you can get some sex from them for all intents and purposes. Because like a lot of these women are very come from conservative cultures, and they don't want their business out there. Even though, even though in a lot of those countries they're out there anyway, but they don't want their business out there, and they don't want everybody knowing that they're out there. So it's one of those things where it's like if you can keep your mouth shut, they're more inclined to mess with you in a lot of these countries, and that goes for any man, white, black, Chinese, Puerto Rican, Asian, and stuff like that. As long as you don't, sit up there and be trying to gloat and, be sitting there trying to take a million pictures and shit like that to gloat on your social media page, you're fine. Um, because there's a lot of men that do stupid shit like that. Then when they go back, they're met with a cold reception to that country, which is actually pretty funny, and I always watch it, and it's the funniest shit in the world. So a lot of these countries, as long as you keep it on a DL, you're fine. As long as you ain't trying to put them on blast or embarrass them, you're fine. Um, well, I wouldn't go to Greece if you're black. Um, hell, I wouldn't go to Greece if you're white either. Um, right now. But I definitely wouldn't go if you're black or if you look like some type of minority or mutt or mixture. Basically, I wouldn't go to Greece if I were you. I would just skip past Greece and just keep it moving. Um, I mean, don't get me wrong, they do got some nice women, but typically with that culture, the men tend to be a little bit more jealous. So you can get jumped in the street by a bunch of Greek men. Damn, they're like tiki torch pitchfork style. Um, because they tend to be a lot more jealous when it comes down to it. So typically, I would avoid trying to smash and dash in Greece if you're going to smash and dash in Greece. Um, Poland's another country like that too. But as long as you keep it down and you don't put that woman on blast and you don't embarrass her, you're not trying to you're not being an embarrassing person. You'll be fine in places like Poland and places like that. Um, that's pretty much how that works. For all intents and purposes. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Anybody got any more questions? Because I know Yam's asking a billion questions. Yeah, if you're African American or if you're European American, I mean European. If you're black European, if you're black European, Scandinavia is good for you. If you're black European, Afro American, or Afro Canadian, Scandinavia is good for you. Yeah, Germany's definitely a good place to check out if you're any race. I would say definitely check out Germany if you're any race. Um, Check out Italy if you're any. I wouldn't say any race. I would say check out Italy if you're black. Um, Check out Spain if you're black. Check out Portugal if you're black, and check out yeah, definitely. Um, if you're black, if you're white, you're pretty much could check out all of those places as long as you're not. I would say I would check out all those places as long as you don't live in that country. Um, Even if you're part of the European Union, you can pretty much travel to any country you want. I would say definitely check out all those places because it'll be good for you most definitely to broaden your horizons. Even if you're in a U, if you're a part of the UE, you could definitely check out all the other countries around you. Most definitely, you probably have a better chance of dating somebody from other parts of the UE than anywhere else. Well, the irony to that is all countries speak English. A lot of the women in Eastern Europe speak English, and they speak it very well. Typically, it's basically like what I was saying about Latinos. When I say about Latinos or Jamaicans, we typically have this habit of ignoring you and pretending like we don't know English just so you can go away. And I've pretty much been to all those places in Eastern Europe. I would say definitely, um, when it comes to Eastern Europe, I would say definitely check out, like I said, Belarus, um, Russia, Ukraine, and pretty much all the countries like that that used to. If they let's just put it this way, if it was a part of the USSR, check it out most definitely. Joe Montana. Um, when it comes to Eastern European countries, if it's part of the USSR, check it out. That's the best way I can pretty much tell you. So if it was a country that was a part of the USSR, definitely be willing to check it out if you're Asian. Another good country for Asians to check out is Latin America. Pretty much anywhere in Latin America. Um, let it be Central or South, or let it be Mexico. Definitely check it out. Um, those are also good places for Asian men. Um, because the sad part about that, there's a huge Asian Latin mix in a lot of those countries. Um, Asiatic Latin mix basically in a lot of those countries. Let it be Arab, let it be Indian, let it be Asia. Pretty much all of Asia is mixed into that country. It's typically how that works. So when it comes down to it, you basically want to be able to. You basically, let me see what else he's saying. East Asia. Well, like I said, if you stick to Eastern Europe, basically would be good for you, like your Russia's, your Belarus, anything that was a part of the USSR would be good for you to check out if you're an Asian man. Latin America, well, that's if you want white women only. Definitely check out that part of Europe. Um, you can typically get somewhat lucky, somewhat lucky, but you might have to learn some Italian, depending on where you go in Italy and Portugal. But for the most part, if you're going to do that, I would typically say check out check out Eastern Europe. Um, Germany might be a good place for you to check out too as well. And I'm trying to think of a country around there where I've seen Asian men holding hands with white women. Also decent at a decent number that is. Oh, Scandinavian countries will be good for you to check out too. If you're Asian man, if you're an Asian man, they're not. It won't be it won't be as readily available as as Eastern Europe, but Scandinavian countries are pretty much nice for you. And I would say it won't be as numerous as it would be if you went to Latin America. Because there are a lot of white groups in Latin America that you can actually definitely check out, especially when it comes to Uruguay and Paraguay. Uruguay and Paraguay, they got like a decent white population there, and typically they look more European than they look Latin for all intents. I mean, like the typical Latina. Um, so Uruguay and Paraguay would be a definitely good place to check out. Um, I normally wouldn't suggest this to people, but since you like white women, I would tell you definitely go check out Argentina. If you're Asian man. Um, I already named the countries in Eastern Europe. If it was a part of the USSR, check it out if you're an Asian man. If it was once a part of the USSR, I'm pretty sure you know it. I'm pretty sure you know what countries are a part of the USSR. But I'll pull up the map for you. Let's see here. Get a map. Grabbing a map. All right, here we go. Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus, Uzbekistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Latvia, and Estonia. Also includes yeah, I already said Ukraine and Russia, obviously. Ukraine and Russia, Georgia, yeah. And I already said Belarus. So basically everything that once was a part of Eastern Europe, definitely go check out if you're an Asian man. Um, like I said, but if but like I was saying, I mean, it's going to be easier than you checking out Scandinavia, but it won't be as easy as you checking out Latin America. Let's just keep it 100. It's going to be easy. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be easier. It's going to be a lot easier than Scandinavian countries, for all intents and purposes. But any of those countries I just named off the top of my head, and I just checked out, would be definitely good for you to check out if you're an Asian man. Oh, and Germany, as well as Germany as well too. So definitely check out Germany too if you're an Asian man. Um, yeah. The sad part about that is when you're in those countries, you can't act timid though. So don't be timid. Don't be timid in those countries because you'll probably be skipped over or looked over because typically that's seen as a sign of weakness. So why would you want to mess with somebody that looks weak or looks scared? So don't look timid in any of those countries. I mean, you can look lost, but don't look timid. um, it's typically what I would say to you about as far as that's concerned. Um, you can pretty much find any woman in those countries that speak English because most of those countries, a lot of those women speak some English because a lot of them, ironically, a lot of those women learn Um, multiple languages for all intents and purposes, and there's some that actually they may not speak like fluent English, but they know enough English. They know enough English to charm you into getting in your pants. um, so a lot of those countries actually do speak a lick of English. Um, for all intents and purposes. So I would definitely check out those countries. Um, okay, fine. I'll get a map. Make town a wind. That Pinterest again? Please tell me that's not okay. That's Word Atlas. Good. There we go. Let's see. We'll do a share because Town to Win said he wants to see a map. Um, there we go. So, like I said, any of these countries right here, plus any of these countries right here, plus Germany is good for Asian men to check out. The irony to that is what a lot of people don't know is there's a huge Eastern European women, Asian man dating market, and typically how it works is they're actually a bigger they're like one of the biggest communities out there as far as like mixed races. They typically are one of the biggest communities out there. Um, It's typically how it works. Um, yeah, so you're going to want to check out that most definitely. All of them. They speak English in all of them. They know some English in all of them. If you don't know their language, they're very accommodating to you in those countries. Yeah, they're very accommodating to you in those countries. Not everything's about country. So definitely check out Russia. They speak English in Russia too. They speak English in Belarus. They speak English in Ukraine. They speak English in pretty much all of those countries. They know English because English is one of those languages that's one of the fastest growing languages in the world, and pretty much every single country can speak English to certain extents. Certain populations can actually speak enough English to do an interview. So it's one of those things where like you've got to actually be able to go there and actually do something. A good country, if you also, I know you like your white women, but if you really want it much more easier, I would say definitely go to Costa Rica. 70% of Costa Ricans speak English. They're the most English speaking Latin American country. Um, yeah, it's typically how that works. If you're Asian, I would say stay near a college town is a good thing to do. Stick near a college town is also another good thing to do. Like your Penn States or your University of Toronto's, California, for all intents and purposes. But if you like white women, Eastern Europe is probably your best bet. Like I said, I've been to all those countries. Why are you asking the same question over and over again? I've been to all those countries, and I'm basically answering you. Go to any of these countries. I would say Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine if you really want a woman, and Germany. They're very nice and they're very nice and down to earth. I typically don't date white women, but they're very nice and down to earth while I was there, and very accommodating. Why are you asking this question over and over again? I've answered this question over and over again multiple times. I put forth those four countries multiple times talking to you. Why are we doing this in a circle? Yeah, they typically are the women are basically very feminine women. So it's one of those things where it's like you got to go there to actually experience it. But typically, like I said, I don't date white women, so therefore they're not my cup of tea. So it's one of those things where you got to go check it out yourself. But they're very nice and they're very accommodating and they're very demure and they will take care of you for all intents and purposes. Because I remember when I went to school in Russia, I had a female roommate. I had two female roommates, and the one would always make sure I was fat, and the other one would always make sure I got to where I needed to go. If that paints a better picture for you. So they're both very nurturing, and the one always made sure I was fed and made sure I was okay, and the other one made sure I got to where I needed to go for all intents and purposes when in Russia. As far as Belarus, the same thing. Estonia, the same thing. So if you're going to go somewhere, I would say definitely check out Latvia, Latvia, Estonia, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. And Georgia. They all speak English there. They all know enough English to basically help you get around if you get lost. Pretty much most of these countries that I've mentioned, except for Latin America, because we tend to be dicks, will speak English to you. Um, without treating like we don't understand English. All these countries will actually speak English to you. They will all be nice to you, and they will all help you get to where you need to go if you're lost, for all intents and purposes. The women are very nice, they're very pretty, and they will help you to where you need to go. Is the best way I could say unbiasedly, since I don't date white women. So yeah, for you, I would say definitely check out Estonia. Definitely check out Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, and Georgia. Definitely check out Georgia. Well, I would say check out Georgia after you check all of the rest of those countries. Um, simply what I would say. Any more questions before I end this stream? Any more questions? Hell, they even speak English in Italy, and Spain, and Portugal. Now that I think about it, and France. You can actually get somebody who speaks English to you in France too. But typically, if you're Asian, I would probably dodge those countries that I just named, from Spain to Portugal to Italy. I would say if you're going to holler at somebody in Italy, I would say probably check out either mid to southern Italy if you're going to check somebody out in that country. Anywhere else, I would say it's going to be hit or miss. Um, outside of that, any questions? Any questions? Well, if there's no more questions, I guess I'll be wrapping this up. If there's no more questions, okay, I guess everybody's good. I'll be wrapping this up. Did I forget a group? I already said Arabs. I already said white people. White men, I said Arabs. I said black men. I said black men if you have that southern drawl that makes it sound like you're from Deliverance. Um, I've already said Caribbeans and Africans. Um, I touched on Asians, both Indian and Orients. Um, yeah, typically, yeah. Um, yeah, that's about it. If nobody has any more questions, if you have more questions, I'll be happy to do a part two to this, where I start talking about like the various women in those countries and my thoughts on them. Like, and definitely tell you about my thoughts on them, because this last year I drug on an hour and something minutes basically. So I'll break down like the women. Matter of fact, I will do a part two to this. I'll do it next Wednesday. I'll do a part two to this, and I'll actually break down the mentality of the women in various countries. I'll probably have to do it in multiple video thing format, for the fact that there's going to be a shit ton of women based on culture, or based on even within those countries for all intents and purposes. So I'll break down like even further like the general culture, or I'll try to put them together in a certain group to basically give you the general culture of who they are, what they are, and how they interact, and how they are for all intents and purposes. So Yeah, I'll do. Matter of fact, I'll do a part 2 to this next Wednesday, and I'll do a part 3 to it the following Wednesday, and I should probably be able to finish it with part 3. If I can't, then I'll finish it up with part 4 the Wednesday after that, for all intents and purposes. So it'll probably drag on for 4 Wednesdays. Um, so I'll just pretty much make this a series. I'll make it a 3 or 4 part series basically for this reason, because I hate dragging my podcast longer than an hour and 20 minutes, and I've already done that already. So I'll break it down into another podcast because I'll have to really break it down and go into depthly on the mentality and the cultures in those countries. Generally, the women in those countries are pretty, pretty loving and pretty receiving and very, very accepting of people for all intents and purposes. But let's just keep it 100. When it comes to certain groups of people, certain groups of people are more accepted than others. Let's just keep it 100. It's typically how that works. So I'll break down the general. I'll break down the general feel and overall. I kind of sort of broke it down with the Russia thing when I said I went to school there and I had 2 female roommates who pretty much acted like they were my mom and my girlfriend basically. So yeah, I'll break that down. I'll break down general. If I could do it all in one video, I'll break it down in all in one video when it comes to culture and the general feel of those women, um, and stuff like that. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, yeah, I'm in this last stream. So I won't drag it on any longer than it already has. I'm damn near about to hit 1:30. But y'all have a blessed day. Be good to yourselves. See y'all on the next Wednesday's podcast for this same thing. The title will be the same thing, but it'll see part 2, basically. So yeah, definitely come check it out next week. Be blessed. Take care of yourselves. Always be willing to improve yourselves and improve upon yourself, and always be willing to make yourself a better version of yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk, do nothing but spoil yourselves. And what's up, no sweetheart? Sorry you're late to the podcast, but I'm about to end it. But y'all be blessed and have a good one. Catch y'all tomorrow with another podcast. Catch y'all next Wednesday with this same podcast, part 2. Be blessed. Adios.